sure.
I don't know anything about your life. I don't know if you're married, not married, in a relationship with whoever. But let me just ask you, would you arrange for somebody whose name is the Punisher to come and have sex with your partner for money?
If my man was a billionaire who had the influence, the reach, the power of someone like P. Diddy, and he not only is my man, but he is my boss, and he has my life in his hand. And that's what he told me he was into. And that's what he told me he needed from me. How do I not do that? Whether or not I like it or don't like it. What choice?
Get out of here. That's the no accountability whatsoever.
That this is heading from being a sort of open slam dunk shut case for the feds to potentially a sensational acquittal. What is your view of where we are with this?
It can go either way. Good morning, by the way.
Morning.
Here's my position. Without question, they've not proven that there's been any corporation or organization that was organized for the purposes of satisfying P. Diddy's sexual needs. Bad Boy Enterprises was formed, I think, in 1998. And the government's alleging that this RICO statute covers those actions of finding Bad Boy Productions, which I think has like 50 or 60 platinum albums before Cassie even came on the scene. I think that's a horrible failure by them. I don't know if he's walking on everything, but I can tell you I have real issues with the RICO part of this because it's silly to think that when he founded Sean John Jeans, he was really doing that with the knowledge that someday in the future he would meet Cassandra Ventura, and then lure her into a life of voyeurism and swinging and all of the things that went on it. Understand.
Yeah, they act like Sean Combs Enterprises proves the fact that Diddy set this organization up purely for him to set up hotel nights, for him to set up what they call the freak off. That is not what this case is about, but the salaciousness of it causes public sentiment to go one way. And I think that's what the defense is raising now in its motion for a mistrial. They're basically saying you set it up so this guy cannot get a fair trial. That's the thing. People want to say you're defending Diddy if you say this, if you point out the obvious facts of this, but when you look about how this case has been sensationalized and how he's been made into a monster after being in our homes for 30 years plus, you got to wonder what's going on here for real.
Standing that right now his jeopardy, the jeopardy he faces is based upon the horrendous conduct of what he did to that woman in that video. There's no other evidence other than Cassie in this case.
And another point on that video is, if you haven't noticed the actual video, when it breaks down, there is a Louis Vuitton bag in question in the video that it's assumed Cassie was leaving with. Does that indicate there might be some ulterior motive for why Diddy is attacking Cassie in this way? What's rumored is in those bags, which is usually where Diddy kept his jewelry, his money, and his drugs. If you have two addicts fighting over a bag, could that explain why that video is so brutal? Why that video is what it is? That's the place we're at. We're thinking logically about this stuff, not emotionally. We're not trying to get invested in the emotion of this because that can take us off on a strange path. That can take us off on a path that we don't want to go down. As you see so many of these YouTubers who can't stop and reassess what's going on here and think logically.
And everyone can sit there and wring their hands and say, oh, you know, poor Cassie, and I agree. What he did was horribly wrong.
Horrible.
Cassie also has opened herself up to a little bit of criticism when she says, it's not about the money, but I want $10 million from the Intercontinental Motel, which starts to make it seem like it's about the money. And as these horrific images of the video kind of become not as hot as they were before, you start looking at facts and you go, wait a minute. he was in charge of her, yet she was cheating with Kid Cudi, who was his former employee. She was cheating with his former trainer. She had her own apartment. She had her own money. And with 8 men on the jury, this case might have been won in jury selection, because I'm telling you, from the people I've listened to and the many of the different people who've spoken about this, I think there's some issues about whether or not this is a proper case for a RICO charge. Start to wondering if the only witness you have and the only charges you have is that he beat up that woman, which he certainly did. But I'm going to tell you one thing, the defense is certainly going to tell the jury, please convict my client of every single charge of domestic violence there is, every one of them, because there are no charges of domestic violence. And so when people start thinking he's going to walk, it's not because he's a great guy. I'm not saying he's a great guy. I've said very clearly he's a piece of bleepity bleep. But, you know, that's not what RICO statute was meant for, that someone can say 12, 13 years later that I want you to pay me $30 million. And I'll make this point very quickly. If this case was so strong, it meant that there was a crime before November of 2023. Yet before November of 2023, Puff Daddy wasn't accused of any crime at all, until Cassie's people said, I need you to pay me $20 million or I'm putting this book out. When they didn't put the book out, now all of a sudden the government says, aha, you've been committing crimes for 12, 13, 14, whatever number of years. As the jurors sit there, they think about that. That's kind of a chilling idea that it's not a crime until you don't pay me money. And so I think the reason that Ray J and Suge have that opinion is because that's kind of the upswelling of opinion on the talk shows and talking to people around here.
Okay, fascinating. Ariel Mitchell-Kidd, you, like I said, was an attorney for a recent Diddy accuser. You know, I did a sort of straw poll with my team today, which was split male-female. And I was struck that most of the women thought there was a good chance he may be acquitted, not because he's anything but a loathsome individual who clearly beats up women. And we all saw that with our own eyes from this horrific video. But that is not part of what he's on trial for. And you know, I think as Matthew laid out there, when it comes to talking to the jury, you know, and they the distraction, that the eyes are taken away from that because they have to by law, and they're left with just what he's been charged with. At the moment, it doesn't look like this is quite the slam dunk case that everybody assumed it would be. In other words, have the feds just overreached here, do you think? It's not to say, like I say, that he's not a bad person or a woman abuser, but is he guilty of these charges? Is there enough that we've seen to justify the scale of the charges?
So first, hi, Piers. Nice to see you again. I dropped the kid. I'm only Ariel Mitchell now. So just moving forward, I'm
well, my
just
apologies for
Ariel
misnaming you, which
no
is
problem.
The social crime of our age.
No
I will rephrase that. Ariel Mitchell, please, over to you.
No worries. So I find it very interesting how propaganda works. And I'm watching propaganda occur in real time, because there's no way that anybody who is really following the case, who's really reading the transcripts that are coming out from the testimony, who cannot, or how do I say this? Most people don't understand what the proof or the burden of proof that the prosecution has to reach in a case like this. RICO has things attached to it called overt acts. So there are certain things, for example, that they have to address. So they have to address in the RICO. So there are certain parts of the RICO and the elements that they have to reach in order to be successful at trial. If anybody is actually taking the time to read the transcripts, which are very long, instead of just reading headlines, they would see very clearly that the prosecution is doing an amazing job, a magnificent job, in my opinion.
So explain.
But then that can go into a question of, is this low bar that the prosecution has to reach? Is it fair to throw a man in jail for life after reaching that low bar? Let's say he's guilty of a couple crimes. Some people said as little as 2 of the listed crimes on the RICO charge. If he's found guilty of at least 2 of those, unanimously from all the jurors, which, because we can go through and pick through each one of the items. A lot of people use the Kid Cudi situation as a automatic thing, but you really don't have Diddy being at that location. And there's actually female DNA that hasn't been tested or is mislocated by the LAPD. So if you go through all of those things and you find that Diddy is guilty of that, is that still something that will stick to Diddy? Just because somebody testifies to something, does that make it then a fact? I would posit no.
Explain exactly
every
why.
testimony.
Give me some examples of why you think that.
So you got predicated acts, right? So there are certain acts that are enumerated in the U.S. Code regarding RICO claims. So the RICO claims is codified in U.S. Code, and then there's predicated overt acts that you have to do in order to further the RICO. So there are things like fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, other things, sex trafficking, drug trafficking. All of these are part of, you only need one of these things to have a RICO, not all of them, but they are part of the predicated acts that must be shown in a RICO count. So once you set out these things, what was the fraud? What was the coercion? What was the trafficking, be it sex, drugs, or otherwise? They are doing a good job of punching each one of those elements.
So the rough approximation of what this is, this S trafficking, the drug trafficking, these are all things that are part of the lifestyle of so many of our artists and rock stars and everything else. So are we going to now go down the list and everybody who has flown someone out for sexual relations, are they going to now be indicted on a RICO? Are we going to get the Rolling Stones indicted on a RICO? Are we going to get Parliament Funkadelic for RICO? You probably could have got them back in the day. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't even know if they're touring anymore, but the Whispers. Are the Whispers going to be gotten on a RICO for smashing groupies and maybe doing a little drugs back in the 80s? This is what I'm saying. It's a slippery slope. It's a very slippery slope with this. And are we going to set a precedent now that we're just going to go one by one down all of the artists that have amassed a certain amount of money, that we're going to figure out how to get them into court and separate them from this money? Because that's what it really seems like the main focus and goal of this is to separate Diddy from his assets. He's already lost 20 million without even walking in the
with every testimony. And it's the lineup. People haven't even paid attention to how masterful the lineup is that the prosecution, the AUSAs, have put on from the start of the trial with I believe it was the first male sex worker, and then they went directly to Cassie. And Cassie's testimony has pretty much set up the testimony from everybody else who's come after her, and it set up the majority of the elements that was needed for the RICO claims. Now, the only problem I see with the AUSAs right now is that they kind of are doing overkill, in my opinion. I think they've already met their burden. I believe they already met all of the elements they need to succeed on a RICO. And I'll tell you here, and I'll tell you first, like I've said this whole time, back in July of 2024, I said Mr. Combs was going to get arrested and indicted, and I was correct. When he did get arrested and indicted, I said that he would not ever receive bond, and he did not. And I'm here to tell you today he will be convicted on a RICO charge.
But even if he is convicted, does it stand up on appeal? That's the next question. Because as we've seen in the Bill Cosby case, you might have him dead to rights. You might have him locked away. But eventually it's going to come around. Not to mention the wild card of Donald Trump potentially pardoning him.
Matthew, back to you. Pretty emphatic contra view there. What's your response?
Well, I appreciate the passion. I do. But he's charged under the White Slave Trafficking Act, which requires that he paid somebody to come out here to have sex. I haven't heard anyone testify or read in any transcript that anyone testified that Sean Combs himself paid anyone. Have you heard that, Piers? I've not heard that any one of these people received
we had
pay.
this character called the Punisher on, who was a male prostitute, and he was actually a very eloquent guy to interview.
Correction, Piers. He actually wasn't a prostitute. He was a male stripper who they invited into this 10-session freak-off situation. So, like we said, who paid for this? We know Cassie paid for everything, right? We know Cassie was paying these people. No money exchanged hands from Diddy to these people. So, I mean, say what you want about influence or request, but she was doing the booking. She was doing the paying. She was coordinating it. I know you might not want to think this because you think he's evil. You think Diddy is the devil, but
guy to interview, and he made it crystal clear that over an 18-month period, it was Cassie that did all the negotiating with him and facilitated all the payments. And in fact, Diddy was, a kind of bit part player sitting naked in the corner watching the Punisher having sex with Cassie, who had arranged everything. So I can still see how that could be construed by a skillful lawyer as a form of coercion. But as Bill Maher said at the end, at the end of his show on Friday, when you have somebody like Cassie Ventura and she's talking about her love of freak-offs and can't wait to do them, it is hard, I would imagine, to sit in the jury and think, why would she say that if she didn't actually enjoy them?
And
Piers,
that's the
if I
big
can- I
difference
hate to
between,
cut
we
you
can
off,
talk
but-
about
you will.
Well, quickly, Ariel, quickly, and I'll come back to Matthew on that point.
Yeah, sure. I think the problem here with the question you just asked was the understanding of what being a woman in love with a man would do. So I think a lot of
That's where we're going. That's where we're going for the excuse. She was just a woman in love. I could think about a billion other reasons she was there. Was that coercion? The presence of wealth and a lifestyle?
On that point.
Yeah, sure. I think the problem here with the question you just asked was the understanding of what being a
What was she doing there before she said that? She was wincing before she made that statement, which is kind of odd if this is what your angle is.
was the understanding of what being a woman in love with a man would do. So I think a lot of this is being, of course.
But you have, well, okay, but let me be direct, Ariel. Let me be direct to you. Let me be direct.
Sure.
I don't know anything about your life. I don't know if you're married, not married, in a relationship with whoever. But let me just ask you, would you arrange for somebody whose name is the Punisher to come and have sex with your partner for money?
If my man was a billionaire who had the influence, the reach, the power of someone like P. Diddy, and he not only is my man, but he is my boss, and he has my life in his hand. And that's what he told me he was into. And that's what he told me he needed from me. How do I not do that? Whether or not I like it or don't like it. What choice?
Get out of here. That's the no accountability whatsoever. That's a shame. And we went through the Bill Maher clip. Bill Maher brought some good points up about saying yes and saying no to certain
in his hand. And that's what he told me he was into. And that's what he told me he needed from me. How do I not do that? Whether or not I like it or don't like it. What choice do I have?
Well,
what choice? Seriously, let's talk about it. What choice does she have? I know a ton of people who tried to go away from Diddy, who tried to leave him, we'll call it, and they were not successful. He blackballed them. He hurt them. He tried to kill them. I mean, it's. I think the thought process of why people are being dense, like they don't understand why she would have done that, being in the position that she was in.
Listen, the Punisher told me that she actively enjoyed it, that they had a really good time over 12 months They met a dozen times. I think. No, I'm sorry. I think it was over. Hang on. It was actually a longer. It was actually a longer period. I think it was over a 2-year period, and they met up to a dozen times. And she was always, according to him, having a perfectly good time.
And
according to him, did he know whether or not she was drugged? Yeah, I mean, we all know she was not herself. We all know she clearly had to go to rehab for some type of substance abuse.
All right, let me bring Matthew in.
And I think for him to say, go ahead.
Okay, Matthew. So
here's the mistake. Here's the mistake everyone keeps making. That woman who took the stand this month is not the woman we're talking about from 13 years ago. She may be a perfectly spectacular mother, wife, significant other today. The charges go back as whether or not she was calling men up who are the punisher and say, come over and do what you do, and then paying them. And the correct response, if someone says, hey, I would really like to do A, B, and C, you say, no, thank you. I don't want to have someone do A, B, and C unless you want to do A, B, and C. He is a domestic violence.
Because of the love of the man, right? If you had a man, what did she say? If she had a man that was a billionaire, there's a lot of things she would do for the love of the man. Yeah, you can't relitigate these things from the past. Like, that's the problem here. In the moment you're saying yes to something, and I'm supposed to interpret 15 years later that, oh, you know what? Maybe she wasn't saying yes because she really wanted to do it. All I know is what you've told me.
Violence defended or should have been without question. You cannot say that when someone sets up a freak off when Diddy's not even there, in between screwing his trainer and his other.
That's an important point. He did set some stuff up while he wasn't there. Most of these things were set up without Diddy's presence. It's like a photo shoot, and he walked into it. It was like a live corn shoot that she was setting up.
Their employee that she's hopelessly helpless in this entire scenario, and you have 8 people on that jury who have unfortunately been through or know someone who's had someone who's cheated on them repeatedly. And every part of this case is based upon whether or not Cassie is credible and believable. And one thing the defense is going to say, we're not talking about this wonderful, talented, pregnant woman here. We're talking about the woman who, as Piers points out, called the Punisher to come back over and over and over and over and over and over and over again over a period of years.
Yep. Not to mention the relationships in between with Kid Cudi, Michael B. Jordan, and she has a lot of freedom in this relationship to be a trapped slave, a trapped S-slave in bondage, as they want to couch it, as they want to portray her to be.
That's rather difficult to believe that this is a person
she was in a relationship with Diddy. Like, are we going to keep glossing over the fact you guys act like Cassie was doing this on her own?
Okay, as Bill Maher said, at some point in time, you have to take responsibility for your life. It's just not her man, though. But it's just not her man, though. It's just not her man, though. First of all,
it is her boss.
Let's be clear.
It is the man who is in control of.
She's losing this argument. That's why she's now hollering over everybody.
Of her life. So to just quantify it in such a way where it's just her man, that is incorrect.
You know what's fascinating? You know what's fascinating about this is actually the way you both go up there is actually the crux of this whole case. It's whether the jury is going to view this as Matthew is viewing it, and many people I know are viewing it, or whether they're going to view it, Ariel, as you're viewing it, and many people I know share your view. And it is split. You know, I know so many people who believe he's got a chance of walking despite being despicable and a woman abuser because they haven't proved their case and because it looks like she was consensually agreeing to a lot of this stuff. And there are other people who agree with you, Ariel, that they think it was a form of long-running coercion by somebody who, as you say, was a very powerful lover, but also a boss. And I think it's going to come down to whether this jury agree with Matthew or agree with Ariel about what Cassie Ventura's mindset was when she agreed to do all these things. I have to say, my own view slightly pivoted after that interview with the Punisher. And that might be unfair, and it might be wrong. But I listened to him and I thought, wow, really? For over 2 years, over a dozen meetings in hotels, she did all the transactional stuff.
She could have left at any time. Once again, what you gonna say? He's gonna track her down after a while. Get ghost for a little while. There has to be some free will here. She wanted to make him happy, right? Right. For what reason?
She seemed to be really enjoying herself. If I'm on that jury, I'm finding that quite difficult to get past. But anyway, we shall see. It's a fascinating case. Thank you both very much indeed for joining me.
So yeah, what do y'all think, man? Let me know in the comments what y'all think, which way you think you see it. I know this is the thing. We can't have a nuanced discussion about this because every time somebody brings up a counterpoint to what the going narrative is, they're somehow villainized. They're somehow looked at as some type of an abuser. And I've even seen people that I've had interactions with just completely fold themselves over in ways to demonize the people that are even commenting on this. But yes, I am a contrarian in some ways, but I look at this as like, this is obviously being slanted in one way for a reason. So I'm wondering if people are going to wake up to this and start realizing like, hey, not so fast. We can't do what we think we're going to do just because we don't like this guy. He's unsavory and he's hateable. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying he's a good dude at all. But, I mean, he literally named his company Bad Boy. So are we going to now say that makes you have to stay in jail, in prison for the rest of your life and be stripped of all your wealth? Well, we're going to find out here soon, sooner or later. Anyway, if you like this video, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification for all uploads. This is Faucette Media.